The very forests of Lordaeron whispered the name.
Introduced as the Master of the Scourge, the Lich King has managed to telepathically control the entire realm from the confines of his frozen throne. This title was first created by Kil'jaeden, from the spirit of the orc shaman Ner'zhul, with the intention of raising an undead army, and it has evolved extensively over time. The Lich King went on to betray his creator, and even embark on several adventures of his own in the World of Warcraft, wherein he was voiced by Michael McConnohie. Today, we shall take a deep dive into his origins and unique physiological details, and tell you everything there is to know about the Lord of the Scourge, aka the Lich King. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Who created the Lich King? A millennia ago, Ner'zhul unsuccessfully tried to escape Draenor when the demon lord Kil'jaeden caught him in the act and triggered a chain of events that led to the Lich King's creation. Kil'jaeden even went as far as to enact a blood pact to bind Ner'zhul and destroy his body, but carefully storing his spirit in a block of ice from the twisting nether. Over time, Kil'jaeden started granting him increased power, until he turned powerful enough to defeat death, and he finally brought him into the world as the Lich King, Lord of the Dead. What drives the Lich King? Since the Lich King's personality was derived from Ner'zhul, he was already quite a ruthless and cynical being. He was also seen as a combination between Arthas and Ner'zhul, and had no qualms about portraying himself as an incredibly cruel being. He treated his army as worthless fodder who were only meant to sacrifice themselves for him, and he was driven by his hatred toward living beings. The Lich King often imposed sadistic punishments upon those who tried to oppose him, and he was currently said to possess the personality of Bolvar Fordragon. In this form, Fordragon's benevolent characteristics did shine through his otherwise cruel persona, and subdued Ner'zhul's evil intent to some extent. How did the Lich King form the Scourge? To begin with, the Lich King was sent across the Great Dark Beyond, all the way to Azeroth, where the ice that had stored his spirit took the form of the Frozen Throne. He soon ascended to the throne and started forming the undead Scourge army, even if it meant that he would weaken the world. The Lich King hoped that his undead army would not suffer a bad fate after unending internal conflicts, which had previously been the cause of the orcs' defeat in conquering Azeroth. He was also accompanied by Tychondrius and the Dreadlords, and he spent most of his time experimenting with his newfound psychic powers and using them to torment local lifeforms. He soon unleashed a plague of undeath and turned every one of these undead beings into an army with some help from his necromantic powers. This enabled him to conquer most of Northrend, and he grew immensely after feeding on more souls and turning them into his servants. The Lich King claimed that their souls provided him with some much-needed nourishment, and the Dreadlords grew increasingly concerned about his exponential rise to power. They even kept a sharp eye on him while he declared war on the kingdom of Azul-Nerub, after discovering that the inhabitants were immune to the effects of his plague. Soon enough, this conflict stretched over the course of 10 years and was even called the War of the Spider. It finally came to an end after he discovered that the Nerubian population's corpses could be reanimated, even if they were unaffected by the plague. However, he was quite impressed by their resilience, and decided to adopt their architecture as a testament to their tenacity. After gaining control over almost all of Northrend, the Dreadlords tried to divert his attention to the invasion of the Burning Legion, and the Lich King then telepathically summoned all kinds of dark souls from Azeroth. Kel'Thuzad was one of the first people to answer his call, and the Lich King immediately trapped him and labeled him as one of the founding members of the Cult of the Damned. He hoped to create a cult that would worship him, and practice his necromancy teachings to raise more undead armies, unaware that Ner'zhul was secretly plotting to escape prison and return to the world. What was the Lich King's role in Lordaeron's fall? After several months' worth of prep, Kel'Thuzad and the Cult of the Damned released a plague upon Lordaeron, while Prince Arthas Menethil and Lady Proudmoore tried to find a solution to this. They worked with Captain Falric to put an end to the plague, but Kel'Thuzad's forces had already destroyed most of Lordaeron's northern settlements. As the undead unleashed chaos all over Lordaeron, Prince Arthas stepped up to lead his armies against the undead, and even killed Kel'Thuzad in the process. As it turned out, the Lich King hoped that the prince would kill the chief commander, as this only agitated the undead army, which grew in number as more and more soldiers dropped dead. Eventually, Arthas grew desperate and ordered that every single plague-infected citizen must be slaughtered across Stratholme, while his comrades cautioned him about losing his humanity. He paid no heed to them, and eventually tracked the plague down to Mal'Ganis in Northrend, when his old friend, Muradin Bronzebeard, told him about a secret weapon that would help defeat the undead Scourge armies. He didn't realize that this was a ploy ploy to get him to hold the cursed Frostmourne and be bound to the Lich King for eternity. As soon as he touched the blade, the Lich King claimed his soul and transformed him into the first of many Death Knights, before sending him off to destroy Lordaeron. While Arthas was in line for the throne, he lost his sense of identity after his transformation, and killed his father before bringing ruin to his kingdom. How did Arthas become the Lich King's champion? Soon enough, the Lich King started using Arthas to spread the plague across the entire kingdom, while rebel organizations such as the Order of the Silver Hand tried to stop them. However, Arthas was unstoppable, and his newfound power got to his head as he led the Scourge to the High Elven kingdom of Kel'Thalas to resurrect Kel'Thuzad. While the High Elves tried to stop him, Arthas used their millennia-age Sunwell to resurrect Kel'Thuzad as a Lich, an act that won over the Lich King's heart. Over time, he focused on laying siege to Dalaran, reclaiming Medivh's spellbook, and gaining access to the incantations needed to summon Archimonde. While Kel'Thuzad prepared himself to perform the incantations, he read the entire book and told Arthas about Medivh's extensive knowledge of demons. Eventually, they managed to summon Archimonde, who immediately tasked Tychondrius and the Dreadlords to take control of the Scourge. However, the Lich King, or Ner'zhul, was not ready to give up control over his undead army, and he remembered that he still had access to the Frozen Throne. While he continued to remain in power, Illidan Stormrage's impressive magical abilities caught his eye, and he sent Arthas to locate him. Arthas told Illidan all about the Skull of Gul'dan and its magical power, which drove Illidan to obtain the skull and harness its energies. After successfully recruiting him, the Lich King sent Illidan to kill Tychondrius and annihilate the Archimonde as well. Why did the Lich King lose power in the Plague Lands? After Ner'zhul went against the Legion's will, he sensed that Kil'jaeden's demonic forces would soon be after him, and he found himself in hot water. He also realized that he was slowly losing his magical abilities after he had pushed Frostmourne from his throne and caused a tiny crack in the cask. Illidan had also placed a spell on the crack to worsen it with time, and the Lich King felt as if his powers were slowly seeping out of his body. At the same time, Arthas also started losing most of his powers, as they were directly linked to the Frozen Throne and Frostmourne. As his powers weakened, he lost his hold over the armies of the undead, while Ner'zhul was still trapped within the Frozen Throne and dreading the forces of Kil'jaeden. He then summoned Arthas to help him out, while Arthas was caught in the middle of a civil war in Lordaeron. He could sense that the Lich King's weakness was subsequently draining him out, and he finally decided to appoint Kel'Thuzad to lead the Scourge in his place. As things got worse in the Plague Lands, Banshee Sylvanas Windrunner freed most of the undead from the Lich King's influence and took control over the capital of Lordaeron. They labeled themselves as the Forsaken, and swore to defeat the Scourge and Kel'Thuzad's forces. While the Lich King was pretty powerless against them, Arthas decided to travel to Northrend to take care of the situation. He ended up facing Illidan's Naga and the Blood Elves, and eventually had to race them to the Ice-Crown Glacier to defend Ner'zhul and the Frozen Throne from Illidan. What happened when Arthas and Ner'zhul merged? On his journey, Arthas also fought against Prince Kael'thas' forces, with some help from Anub'arak, and eventually found himself facing the prince. The two ended up in a clash, and Kael'thas used his father's Phalo-Malorn runeblade, which clashed against Arthas' Frostmourne. Eventually, Arthas managed to overpower Kael'thas, and made his way to the Ice Crown obelisks to activate them and gain access to the Frozen Throne. As he entered the place, he realized that Illidan was already waiting for him there, and the two of them had an intense battle, where Illidan almost defeated Arthas with his demonic powers. However, Arthas found his weakness and managed to turn the tide by striking him in the chest and slicing it open. While Illidan fell to the floor, Arthas warned him to stay away from Azeroth before walking through the doors of Icecrown. Arthas then made his way through the Hollow Glacier, where he heard the echoes of every Forsaken soul he had ever encountered. He recognized Uther's voice, warning him that his bloodlust might make him as vile as the orcs. Muradin chimed in, but he tried to tune them out as he made his way to the pinnacle. As he approached the icy cask with a suit of armor on the pinnacle and made his way to the throne, he heard Medivh warn him that he would find death in the cold north. On the other hand, Ner'zhul furiously whispered to him and demanded that he must return Frostmourne and release him from his prison. Finally, Arthas garnered enough strength to drag Frostmourne next to the Lich King's icy prison, which resulted in the Frozen Throne's explosion. While the Lich King screamed out loud, Ner'zhul's thorny helm fell to Arthas' feet, who immediately picked it up and placed it on his head. By doing this, Arthas merged himself with Ner'zhul, whose voice echoed in his head and declared that they were now one entity. As their spirits fused together, we learned that the Lich King had planned for this to happen all along, in order to create the most powerful entity in Azeroth. How was the Lich King defeated? In the aftermath of the Argent Tournament and Anubarak's death, the Argent Crusade stepped up to ally with the Knights of the Ebon Blade. They established the Ashen Verdict to merge their opposing forces to finally destroy the Scourge. While the Argent Crusade was led by the High Lord Tyrion Fordring, the Knights of the Ebon Blade followed High Lord Darion Morgraine, who marched to the Icecrown Citadel to ensure the Lich King's defeat. What role did Bolvar Fordragon play? High Lord Bolvar Fordragon also played a key role in the Lich King's defeat, even though this demonic entity was determined to make Fordragon serve him. While Fordragon declared that he would never work for him, things played out in a way that High Lord Tyrion Fordring got his hands on the Helm of Domination. Placing this artifact on his head would result in him embodying the spirit of the Lich King, and Fordragon declared that Fordring should save himself from such a grim destiny. Instead, he offered to bear this burden, and even insisted that the dragon's flame had already decided his fate, and that he had no place in the world of the living anymore. While Fordring insisted that he could not let him sacrifice himself, Fordragon declared that he would step up to be the jailer of the damned, and even ordered Fordring to place the crown upon his head. Still protesting, Fordring worked up the courage to obey Fordragon's decision, and assured him that he would never be forgotten while placing the cursed crown on his forehead. As the chamber started shaking violently, Fordragon's eyes started glowing yellow, and his voice changed to that of the Lich King. However, Fordragon's spirit preserved within his body, and he declared that both the Lich King and Fordragon have died together. As the frozen throne froze them in place and encased Fordragon in ice, he commanded Fordring to run away and never return to this cursed place. What was the Lich King's impact on Azeroth? When the Lich King perceived the Legion to be a threat to Azeroth, he got in touch with High Lord Darion Morgraine to strike a deal. He proposed that he would lend his Death Knights so that he could fight against the Legion, as long as he could continue his Scourge all the way to Northrend. While the rest of the Death Knights formed an order, the Lich King trained them to use a variety of weapons, such as shards of the Shattered Frostmourne, a sword of corrupted souls, and a lethal axe. He then reformed the 4 horsemen, who were currently lost in the floating city of Naxxramas, including Commander Trollbane, High Inquisitor Whitemane, Nazgrim the Orc General, and High Lord Morgraine. The Lich King even tried to get Tyrion Fordring, but he was unsuccessful in his mission, and he was kicked out of the Lights of Hope Chapel by the Blood Knight Lady Liadrin. He then proceeded to convince the Lich Amalthazad to scrawl a bunch of runes on top of the Acheras, in hopes that the Death Lord might be able to communicate with them easily. The Death Lord then gained access to the memories of the previous Lich King Arthas, but the current Lich King Fordragon was unable to track down the location of these memories. The Lich King even offered tremendous power to anyone who could identify the location in Arthas' memories, and threatened that he would take control of the Acheras, the Order of Death Knights, and the Reformed Horsemen if they failed. The Death Lord completed this order and tried to track Arthas' memories down to a hidden iceberg in Icecrown, but he was soon confronted by some rebel Scourge, who had already been feeding off the power of the great fallen dragon. The Death Lord managed to defeat them, and then used their essence to resurrect the dragon, allowing it to mimic the powers of whoever rides it. In the aftermath of the Battle of Azeroth and the Sargeras defeat, Sylvanas Windrunner went all the way to Icecrown to meet with Bolvar Fordragon. This led to a face-off where Sylvanas trapped Fordragon with her magic, and confiscated the Helm of Domination, which led us to assume that she would wear it and turn into the next Lich King. However, her actions caught everyone off guard, as she tore the artifact apart and declared that its power was a prison, much to Fordragon's surprise. How does Frostmourne relate to the Lich King's power? The Frostmourne was a rune blade with the power to trap people's spirits, and it was designed by the Nathrezim with the intention of containing and controlling the Lich King. The blade first made an appearance when Kil'jaeden transformed Ner'zhul into the Lich King, and then proceeded to trap his spirit in a magical suit of armor, and the Frostmourne. Over time, Arthas Menethil stumbled upon the blade on an adventure across Northrend, and he then used it to become the new Lich King, until Tyrion Fordring destroyed it at the Icecrown Citadel. Was the Lich King worshipped? Fans have often wondered whether the Lich King can be considered a god, since he originated with Kil'jaeden, but went on to attain exponential amounts of power. While most gods in the World of Warcraft have originated in the Pantheon, the Lich King had no such history. However, he played the same role as the other gods who contributed to building Azeroth, as Elune gave birth to the Night Elves, while the Dragon Aspects guarded several precious elements in Azeroth. In the same way, the Lich King is credited with the creation of the undead, even though this act cannot be considered holy by any means. Several Blizzard texts and Warcraft manuals still refer to him as a godlike entity, and the Warcraft Encyclopedia defines God as an immortal being who's been worshipped in Azeroth. While we can certainly say that the Lich King seems immortal, he has not been worshipped extensively, and the only beings who do serve him are members of the Cult of the Damned. Some mortals called acolytes and innumerable undead beings do worship him, and the Vrykul especially worship him as a death god. In addition to this, the Tuskarr likened him to the death god Karkut, and all things considered, it's safe to say that he is a god. What are the Lich King's powers? The Lich King has attained mastery over ice, and he can bend it to its will to burn an opponent, trap them in an icy death coil, and even drain one's life force. He can also use necromancy to resurrect people or raise an army of the undead, and then compel them to worship him. Additionally, he has the ability to revive souls and then bind them to him or any other physical body, and even communicate with them telepathically to order them. He is notoriously known for stealing people's lives, and he would often suck people's energy to boost his own powers temporarily. He viewed this as a form of nourishment, and sometimes even used it to strengthen his army of the undead. Sometimes he would sacrifice one of his undead followers to absorb all their life force, and then use it to heal his injuries in extreme conditions. The Lich King can also blast energy-based attacks known as the Death Coil, which manifests in the form of a green mist and black smoke before claiming people's lives in a single hit. What are the Lich King's notable battles? For starters, the Lich King notably fought against Tirion Fordring, who led the Argent Crusade and dedicated his life toward destroying the Scourge. The two were complete foils of one another, and they fought on numerous occasions, including the Battle of Azeroth, until Tirion finally defeated the Lich King. He also considered Sylvanas Windrunner to be one of his most hated opponents, but she held the prestigious position as the Banshee Queen of the Forsaken. The two first fought when the Lich King defeated her as a mortal high elf and turned her into one of his slaves, but she soon retaliated and broke free from his control. She then unleashed a master plague to destroy the Scourge, an incident that left the Lich King furious. Over time, she managed to infiltrate the Ice-Crowned Citadel to face the Lich King in person, but his power was too extreme, and she eventually accepted her defeat. The Lich King had also formed an interesting dynamic with the Northrend Wars adventurers, who were typically perceived as trouble. However, he saw their potential and sent his strongest soldiers to fight them and test out their power. He then concluded that they were formidable opponents, and they created a whole lot of trouble for him during the betrayal of Dracudu. While the Lich King was still amused by their strength, he decided to kill them and then raise them as undead followers during the raid on Ice-Crowned Citadel. However, this plan backfired, and the adventurers joined hands with Tirion Fordring to bring about his downfall. Marvelous verdict. And with that, we conclude our exploration of the Lich King's extensive story arcs, as well as powers. While he played a huge role in the creation of the Scourge, he also left a lasting mark on places such as Azeroth and the Plague Lands. He might not have won every single one of his battles, but he certainly established himself as a terrifying entity with a lasting legacy. We hope you enjoyed exploring his story arcs with us, and we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone!